Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday morning D&D show. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Saturday morning at the very end of November.
Yeah.
We're going into December.
Yeah, how was your Thanksgiving?
Hopefully, a lot like everybody else's.
Your American
It was
Thanksgiving,
very
I should
quiet. Yeah, it was very quiet, very small. Just the people that already live in my home. We didn't really do anything, but it was kind of nice for gamers like me to be able to go do dinner and then come back to gaming all Thursday and Friday and stuff. So it was pretty fun. So
Yeah, we decided to set the table and make it look real nice, even though it was just the four people in my house, me and my wife and my mother-in-law, my baby. But it was kind of fun to like dress up the table and all this other stuff. Although my wife was like, "Well, are you gonna go get the china?" And I'm like, "No, not for us. I'm not doing that because that's
Don't need it.
a huge hassle." And then we have to like no. And so I was just like, I don't want to do that. But it was fun. It was really nice. And we kind of just lounged around. We ended up putting on the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Just like, you ever get in those situations where you're like, I don't know what to watch, and you want something familiar that you don't necessarily have to pay attention to if you don't want to, and that's what happened. And we ended up watching 4 of them. Like, it just kept playing, and periodically I'd leave and do something, and then I'd come back and be like, oh yeah, this part. And so we had those on. It was fun. But
yeah, we watched Mandalorian. We rented New Mutants, which was one of those movies that didn't get released in the theaters, so they kind of put it out there.
Well, that's
so
an interesting one because that was supposed to be released they finished filming in 2017.
Right.
And they were like, okay, we have a release date, and then they pulled it. And they were just like, no, we'll release it 2018, 2019. And then they finally released it in 2020. Always saying, I'm a big X-Men fan, and so I was really excited for this movie. That's why I followed it. But they were always saying like, oh, we're doing reshoots and we're doing this and we're doing that. And they never got the reshoots done. And I want to say because of COVID, but no, because they had all of 2018 and 2019 to take care of this. And then the Disney Fox merger happened, or acquisition, I should say. And so then it was like, well, we'll just throw it out there. So they got it out. Yeah. I ended up watching it too a couple days ago, and it's a sad end to an X-Men franchise that had its ups and downs, but I liked the girl that played Magic, and apparently Magic is one of my favorite X-Men, and apparently she is in the Queen's Gambit, and she's quite good in that, and she's actually really good in this too. So
yeah, my wife was like, because they had just finished Queen's Gambit, and so we turned that on last night, and she's like, there's that character that they've been watching for the last week now because they've been powering through Queen's Gambit, and they actually was a powerhouse of actors. I mean, you had the kid from Stranger Things. You had Arya Stark from Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
you had Ileana. You had, and even the two, the other boy, I feel like he was from some other stuff. The guy who plays Sunspot.
Yeah.
Although we don't really learn that. We don't learn their superhero names in the whole movie, which is interesting. But it felt like it was a good movie origin story wise. If you don't know anything about New Mutants, but for fans of New Mutants, I feel like you probably wanted more stuff to happen. Like you want New Mutants to be New Mutants. So I don't know.
And I mean, we're not a movie podcast, so we should probably not get into too depths about this, but like there were a lot of problems. And from what I heard, the director wrote the script and directed it. And, that is always like an all or nothing for me. Like you get a Quentin Tarantino and he's like, I'm writing exactly what I want to film and I know how to film it. Or you get these people that are kind of like, yeah, I'm a creative genius. And it's like, you're really not. You're a Kanye West. You're not there to do that. So I don't know. I heard there were a lot of executives that were hands in the process because they wanted something specific out of it. And that's always bad too, because it did feel to me that he had an idea, and probably I would like to see what his original idea was. But when you have all these people that are like, okay, well now you have to do this and you have to do this, and he's doing rewrites, but it doesn't really make sense. And that's how I felt about that whole movie. But I digress.
It also just we'll get back
I'll
to
let you
D&D
have
here.
one more spot.
One more
Lucian.
second.
Go ahead.
It felt like a great start to like a Netflix series.
Yeah, that could have been
Like
cool.
that
And it was
could-
shot kind of
like-
like that too. It was really
like
single room kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like the first 2 episodes, and now episodes 3 through 8 are going to be like, okay, what's going to happen next? I think you'd be really into that. But as a movie, I felt like there just wasn't. You got introduced, but they didn't go anywhere yet.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll do something with it. So it was interesting. So we watched that, and I don't think we did too much else. Did a lot of gaming with just friends that also didn't have family obligations. That was the thing that COVID kind of did this year for us celebrating holidays, and for even if you're in a different country and you go to celebrate a different holiday upcoming in your country, where maybe you used to go and you drive 2 hours to get to a family place, and you do all this family stuff, and you work all these schedules between moms and dads and different families and all this stuff. Right now, a lot of people, or most people, are like, well, we're just going to stay home and not do all that thing. So you're freed up a little bit for gaming, which I really like. So it was interesting to have, just a fun gaming thing, and not worry about going to mom's and then dad's and then uncles and aunts thing and then this over here. So it was pretty good.
Some people in chat were asking about the Saturday morning D&D mugs, and yes, these are on my Teespring store. So if you're interested, you should go, as well as the shirt. Actually, I didn't plan that, but if you want a Saturday morning D&D show mug, you can hop over there, and they're a print on demand kind of thing. And I my mug is from there, and it's been really good, and it's machine washable and all that other stuff. So you can check that out. As far as gaming, I blame my child. He just takes up so much time. And I was telling Lucian, because Lucian heard him like whining earlier, that we're trying to get him to drink less bottles and eat more real food. And he's just been a peach the last couple days, because he's like, but no, like I drink a bottle now. And we're like, well, you're going to eat a strawberry. And he's not about it. So that transition is fun. But yeah, I've been reading, and I'll get into this a little bit later with the Bardic Inspiration, but I found a system called Open D6, and it was a D6 dice system that is kind of like the White Wolf D10 system, but that's the closest thing that I can equate it to. But you use D6s instead, and the better you are at an ability, the more D6s you get, so you get a bigger dice pool to then roll and do cool things. And I'm really interested in making like an RPG hack right now, and I was thinking about 4th edition a lot for the past couple weeks, and I was like, what if I could just use the idea of like a combat simulator that 4th edition kind of was, and then but make my own version of it, kind of a thing. And unfortunately, 4th edition is not part of the open game license, but this Open D6 is. So I was playing around with that. And so as far as gaming, is me with a pencil and paper writing down numbers and like, okay, what's the average of this? And is that enough? And it's been kind of fun to play around with it. So that's really the only gaming that I've done so far is hypothetical dice rolling in my head.
Yeah, there's a lot of game designers that have kind of moved to 2d6 plus stat, and I think it's because they've really worked hard on the maths and the averages to figure out how things are gonna, get away from the swingy D20 of Dungeons and Dragons and get a little bit more consistent of a random range. And so it just feels like so many people have moved to that. But like an Open D6 sounds very interesting too.
Yeah, and I guess back in the day they made a bunch of. Like there was Adventure D6 and Fantasy D6 and Mutant D6 and Superhero D6. Like they used this system for literally everything. And then the final version was called Open D6. And they handed the rules to everybody and said, this is the base structure of the game. You can change it however you want. So, that could be a fireball, or that could be a hacking stat, or that could anything you want to do. And it's really cool. And I've never played it, but like I've played enough RPGs that I kind of get a feel for it when I go through. But I should probably play at least one game of this D6 system before I truly tear it apart and rebuild it into whatever the thing I'm trying to build right now. So but
right.
Yeah. Man, what's going on in the world of D&D? We got
Well,
some.
I mean, it seemed pretty
Tasha's out.
slowish. Yeah. Tasha's is out, so that's everybody's still devouring it and still using it. We didn't see, or I haven't seen anything link about what we might get for our next book. If we're going to get, I think this is probably, if we're about to hit December 1st, I can't imagine they're putting another book out this year. So
Absolutely
Tasha should be the end of 2020.
Maybe like March or April we'll either see something or get an announcement. I don't know.
But 2021 book, the first book. And this past year we got an early-ish Magic the Gathering book. I think was one of the first ones out. So I think so. So we had some adventuring books early in the year, and then we have a rule book at the end of the year. So that's kind of interesting, to see if there's any patterns there, or if they're doing anything there. And we know that they work on their books, years out. So whatever plan they've had is like the set in stone-ish 2-year plan of book releases that they've already talked about and worked on and are happening. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see if they're. I think this year's got pushed because of COVID. So I wonder if we get earlier stuff now with them, everybody acclimating to how COVID's changed schedules of stuff. And like live event. Will we get some live event? Again, another online live event announcement in January or February. Will we get, any of that kind of stuff? So, but it's been slow D&D wise. I think they're taking their vacations. They're winding stuff down. I think that's what we're going to see a lot of. D&D Beyond did a few videos. They're still pumping out stuff because Tasha's out, and that's, if you're going to do a subclass book, D&D Beyond is going to be all about that. So you can learn a little bit more about Psy Warrior and Beast Barbarian and Wild Magic Barbarian and the Blade Singer stuff, which is really one of the good changes out there. But how about the Barbarians? I don't think we talked about those last week. Do any of those barbarians kind of reach out to you? Beast Barbarian, Wild Magic Barbarian?
I didn't like the Wild Magic Barbarian.
Most people said that I've talked to.
Really?
Yeah.
On paper, I should say the idea of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to be an Eladrin, Feywild-born barbarian. Like, what would that look like? That's kind of a cool idea, and I like that idea. But then the mechanics they gave, I was like, no. I'm just not. I'm just not feeling that. If I were to redo it, I would want something where you have like a magical rage mechanic or something. Like maybe you rage based on your intelligence, and it does. I don't know. Like on a hit, you roll. Like while you're raging, when you hit something, I don't know, roll a D4, and they're either like blind for a round or. I don't know, like a flash of light or something, but the way it's done now is it's not controllable. And then the later, which is fine because a wild magic sorcerer isn't controllable. That's fine. But like, there's nothing about barbarians or the Feywild that is chaos and out of control. And I don't understand, like I would associate that more with, I don't know, like the Abyss or like, I can only think of Wild Magic Sorcerer right now, but and that's not necessarily Feywild. That's just you've got powers for some reason you don't know why. So I don't know. And then later on, isn't the abilities are really just to like control the randomness, so it's less random, and that just is like okay. So I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those classes that may have missed. It may have not quite hit the mark they were going for. Or it didn't match up to what you think of in your head when you hear that, like Wild Magic Barbarian, all kinds of things. You start to think, there could be some cool directions we could go with that. But then you look at the actual play of it and you're like, oh, none of that fits what's in my head. Like none of that is anything of what I was thinking about. So I think that sometimes you have that, you have the concept of design versus the actual rules as designed or the mechanics behind to try to drive that. And they don't quite mesh. But,
no, and honestly, we were talking last week, I think, about the Genie Warlock, because we were talking about our favorite things that came out of it. And I was so amped for this Genie Warlock. And then when I actually sat down and built a couple, I can't quite get what I thought it was going to do. And I don't think I truly understood what I wanted it to do. I just liked the flavor of it. Like, a warlock gets powers from genies. But the more I would play it, the more I would like build it and look at it, I'm like, well, it's just another warlock. There's not like, where's that intrinsic genie thing that I want? And yes, you have wish and you have a form of limited wish and you have a, like a bottle or an urn or a ring or a lamp that you can hide in. But I don't know. I just feel, I'm like, where is that? Like, I wish I could have, actually, now that I think about it, it would have been cool to be able to trap a creature in that urn or lamp for, I don't know, an hour for every modifier you have to your charisma or something. So like if they failed a saving throw, it's like, okay, well, they're going to break out at some point, but we can be more ready for them or something. I don't know. Or you need to like smuggle somebody out. You have to like, Yeah,
you'd be great at prison breaks.
Yeah, it'd be kind of cool, but you can't do it to enemies and stuff. So I don't know. But I'm actually working on a video for Wednesday about the Sha'ir and the Warlock Genie and kind of what inspired it. And that video has helped me a lot to just kind of understand, like, what did I actually want out of this? Like, I don't think I really I don't know. But sometimes they just don't work out how you think mechanically, that the idea in your head, But like the Psy Warrior, very cool. And actually a lot of that is kind of what I would anticipate a Psy Warrior.
Very X-Men.
Yeah. Like I'm stopping things with my mind and I'm, jumping high and I'm doing all this other stuff. So it's kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Psy Blades.
Yeah.
Come on, Psylocke.
Exactly. The Soul Knife Rogue. That was, yeah. So there's actually, I'm going to jump ahead and we'll go back, but there's actually, I was looking online to see like, well, what's the new, I don't know, because everyone's building different combos and stuff, and there's the metagamers out there. And there's a cleric, a Tempest cleric, and a scribe wizard combo. And so, and I guess, the Tempest cleric, is that new to Tasha's? I don't remember. I don't think so.
No, Tempest was in Player's Handbook.
Yeah. So the Tempest cleric, you can use your channel divinity, which is called Destructive Wrath, to deal max damage if you use lightning and thunder. And Order of the Scribe lets you change spell damage from one type to another if you have certain spells of similar type. So long story short, you can take Tempest Cleric 2 and the rest in Order of the Scribe Wizard. And then at like level 7, you can do a Fireball, but you can change it to Lightning and activate this ability. And then all of a sudden it does 48 points of damage, just max damage, boom. And then level 12, you can do 100 damage, max damage disintegrate spell. And there's no rolling. And I don't think this is overpowered, but it is definitely something that people will play around with. And I thought that was kind of interesting, so I wanted to bring it up that, yeah, there's people are going to slowly figure this out. And it's weird treating D&D like a... I guess I think of Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone or
video game.
And then you think about like, well, what's the new
Builds.
meta? Because everybody's very competitive and it's like this new card gets released and all of a sudden I have to use that card to apply poison to this and do that. And you do this combo that wins all the time. But D&D isn't like that. Like we're not competing against each other. So why do we still do that? Is it just weird gamer human nature to be like, I have to find out what's the most,
as powerful as possible. Yeah. Like
and I love those videos too, where you're like, how do I make the fastest character? Like, how do I make the guy that can run the fastest? I want to build the Flash in D&D. Like those are fun videos, but they crack me up because I'm like, but I mean, would you really take 7 different subclasses so that you could actually just move 110 feet every round like that, And it's like, well, no, but hypothetically.
Well, we just started. Diablo 3 did its, they run seasons. Yeah. And then they changed something about the seasons. And so then, like you said, the meta changes. So then when the meta changes, then everybody goes back and they build builds that are set for, okay, in season 22 this can be a really good build that lets you push through this stuff. And that made me think exactly what you were talking about, this idea of you're combining things together with this new quirk in the season. You get one more spot for a weapon bonus that you didn't have in season 21. You have it in 22. So now your builds go back and you're like, oh, I'm doing Spirit Barrage Witch Doctor with this and this, and you're moving stuff around. I think there's just intrinsically, we all love that idea of powering up
synergy.
What is
in a
the
way.
Biggest what is,
and I love synergy too, where you're kind of like, so I mean, I can cast Shocking Grasp, but if I apply this thing, I can cast Shocking Grasp from a distance, and then if he can't like take an opportunity attack, I can, and you all of a sudden it's like, when the cards align. Unfortunately for Jordan, when I do those kind of synergies, I get really excited, and then I end up doing it like once, and you're like, oh, well, I did it, but that's not nearly as cool or helpful as I thought it was going to be. Case in point, my Warforged Eldritch Knight, I did a lot of stuff with him because I wanted him to be able to manipulate the battlefield. And then by the end of the day, I was just like, can I replace these spells? They're not doing what I want them to do. Like,
can I go back to cleave?
Yeah. So that's funny.
Yeah. So I like the idea that there's a lot of, and with all the new feats and all the new spells and all the new backgrounds and changing your stat ability scores and combining stuff with Tasha's and combining stuff with Xanathar's guide, there are some really crazy combos you could come up with. We have a player in ours who's already thinking about his third class he's going to multi-class into. And I haven't seen that happen yet in any of our games. It was only because this book Tasha's came out, that it's actually pushed the group into a lot more multi-classing than I've seen before.
Yeah.
And past just 2 even. I'm at 2, and I've never played, and I've theory crafted tons of multi-class characters, but I haven't played any of those in an actual campaign playing a game until just, when I went level 1 cleric added in to my class. But I feel like a lot of people are leaning into it, and I think that's a sign of we're towards the end of 5th, right? I think this is the point we look back on where we say this is the beginning as they start to wrap up, wind down, figure out what they're going to do. There's still more books coming. There's still plenty. I'm not like next month. I mean, like, you could still have a whole nother year, but you'll be able to look back and say it was right at this time when Tasha's came out, that because there's so many options, because there's so many things you can do, it's almost like I bet they start to move on here pretty soon, because it's going to get really unwieldy and really hard to just kind of keep balanced. If they added another subclass book next year, I mean, what is that going to look like now for subclasses and classes? Or what if they added a whole nother class next year at this point? So there's it's
and that's why I think they're going to start diving into things like they kind of already have, but like the psionics, and you're gonna have things like, okay, we're gonna, I don't know if you can make a whole book about this, but I think there's gonna be a book that's like, here's a ranger, but you're actually going to be a psionic ranger in the city or something. I don't know. It's like, okay. And so your abilities are 90% the same, except we've reflavored these 2 things, and here's one new thing. And then, I don't know. So, but like the same time, I wonder, so the success of 5th edition, I feel, hinges on the failure of 4th edition. Like, there was enough time in between the people that played 3.5 and then when 4th edition came out, they were like, I don't really like this. I'm going to keep playing my game. Oh, Pathfinder's kind of like my game. I'm going to play that and da-da-da. And then now that the 5th edition, they're like, oh, actually, this is pretty cool. I'll go back to D&D, or I'll go all up, kind of a thing. And then they're also not making new stuff for 3.5, so that kind of makes sense. But I feel that if we get a 6th edition, it'll kind of be like what Pathfinder did, where like, here's some minor tweaks, but all of the old Pathfinder stuff is still relevant for the new Pathfinder stuff. Because honestly, that's just smarter. And then they can still sell older books. They can still sell, the player's handbook and things like that. But I wonder if we'll have like an original D&D and then a advanced D&D in a way,
Right.
Or do we already have that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or from marketing, they'll do the thing that, sometimes Apple does, sometimes Intel does, sometimes these other games have done it. I think they've even done it. This idea that, okay, we want to get out of having 6th edition, 7th edition, 8th edition. We don't want to have a number attached to it anymore. So we're just going to go to D&D next, or, like it's going to be something, and they always try it for a year. Or they try to say there's no more editions. It's just everything is D&D. It's always D&D. It'll always be D&D. There's never going to be other stuff. It's just you're adding all this new stuff in.
They are different, and I think people will, because people they wanted to call D&D 5th edition D&D Next, and they tried really hard, and everyone's like, well, no, it's 5th edition. And so the people will ultimately name that. So
yeah. But we've seen it like in Windows when they tried to do that, when they went from 95, 98, 2000, and they're like, no, we don't want to do that no more. Now we're in Windows whatever, Windows NT, Windows 2020, Windows whatever. So they're always
the
trying
love
to
of
brand
Windows
it.
Millennium Edition. So good.
Yeah. There you go.
So this is something I wanted to talk about, and it's the title of the episode, but just like, will we get a 6th edition? And kind of, where do we go from here? Because you're right, this is a big book. Like, Tasha's does a lot of stuff. And how many more subclasses can you do? And are we getting to the point where every subclass is just going to, or every class is going to get a sub that allows it to do something that another class can do? So, like, the monk can heal now. So we don't, and we kind of saw this with the warlock. Oh, let's make a celestial warlock and they can heal. Rada 7 parts, we have a celestial warlock. She's the main healer. And it's working. Like, I've given them a few health potions here and there, but for the most part, they're able to, like, keep people alive. And I don't know. Like, are you going to get the healing wizard? Are you going to get we kind of already have things like the stealth wizard, or I always think of the College of Shadows bard, where I'm like, that is the most roguiest bard I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like, you use your bardic inspiration to do extra psychic damage on a hit. That's called a sneak attack. Like, that's all that is. So, and it scales up with level, and it does all this other stuff. And I was like, okay. So, but don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not super interested in playing a rogue, but boy, I was really drawn to that College of Shadows bard. So it's interesting how are we going to kind of, I don't know, like, do they do that so everybody can really find the niche that they want to play? Like, going back to I almost said Wild Sorcerer Barbarian, because that's what I think of it, but the Wild Magic Barbarian.
What if you combine the two? You multi-class.
There you go. Oh, now we have a game, sir. Now we have a game. But no, if you have the player who's like, I've never really been interested in barbarians, but boy, I like the randomness of this. I like the swinginess of it. I like that I can still do magic in a way as a barbarian and be like a tank or something. So I don't know. It's interesting. So
I do feel like it's a step in when you've decided your community really likes and wants and is willing to pay for customization.
Yeah.
But you've built a game based on class, which are silos in the beginning, right? Wizard does wizard things, cleric does cleric things, fighter does fighter things, thief does thief things, right? But as you keep going, you keep thinking in your mind, it sounds really good. Hey, I want to give them more options. I want them to do more stuff. You've actually are breaking what you built in the first place, which was classes, which siloed people into very specific things. Now you're getting to, well, no, anybody can do the thief thing. Anybody can pick the locks. Anybody can cast the spells. Anybody can heal or fight with a sword and armor and whatever. So, yeah, I wonder at one point why start so narrow and then build your game to be much more open. Why didn't you just start open in the first place? Why didn't you just leave it really kind of modular and customizable? And I wonder if they'll learn that lesson at one point, because I think when you talk about game design, I've listened to I've read papers, I've listened to people talking about it on YouTube, game designers on YouTube, talking about when they decide how they're going to do a classless based game or a game based with a classes.
Right.
And it always comes down to introducing new players into the systems. It's easier if you confine their amount of choices that they can't make bad choices. That's what class system really helps people do. So it gets them into the fun quicker, and it helps for the new people. But we're all savvy now. We're not like people coming to games anymore, and it's really the only game we've played. You're talking about the generations that we have right now have been playing games since they were 7. Right, and they understand classes, they understand customizing their characters, they understand power leveling and power gaming at this point. They grew up in it. I wonder if at one point because that's what I would want D&D next, D&D 6th edition to be, is a modular based, classless based system. You have all these pieces and you put it together to build what you want. right?
I think we've talked about this before, but like that's exactly what I'm trying to do with my open D6 system. And I originally it was called like the modular RPG, and then I changed it to the modular D6 because I like that idea of like, you know, putting it on there. But no, like here's 20 points, and here's all of these little Tetris blocks. And if you can take them and fit them in there, that's cool. And so then you start to think to yourself, well, I want to be a traditional necromancer. And you're like, okay, you take necrotic magic, you take spellcasting, and you take pets. And then with those three, you clump them together, and then the mechanics allow you have a necrotic pet. And then you get to say, yeah, that's a skeleton, or that's a zombie. Like, you get to make that choice. Not like, oh, we flip through the pages and my monster is, you know, and actually a great example is Tasha's has all of those different spirits that you can summon now.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, it would be so simpler if you just said there's one spell that summons a spirit, but like depending on who's casting it or what energy they're putting into it, it changes to an elemental spirit, and then it has a fire ability and it does this, or it changes to a necrotic spirit and it's a zombie and it does this. But that's not how 5th edition works, you know, like and the players of 5th edition want that. So it's funny that you bring that up, because that was my original idea, and that's kind of what I've been doing over my Thanksgiving break, is playing around with this. Like, I just want to be able to build, like if I want to build a paladin, what do I need? Well, I think I need armor, and I need this, but I don't want armor, so I'm going to do fist fighting and a dodge and healing. Well, now I've made my weird healing monk, but that's fun. Right. You know, so.
Yeah. So you can build. So classless based system, modular, about being customizable. That's what people want. They want pieces that can fit together and they can do stuff with. That works well if you're going to build online character builders. You know, that kind of stuff works really well. That's why I think the World of Warcrafts, the Diablos have those skill trees. So you have this, you know, this nice wide open kind of thing, but it's still a class, right? And I've seen some variants out there where they rip that out and you can play like World of Warcraft. There's a mod crew that went out there and they took out the classes and they just left a list of all the abilities from those classes. And as you level up, you pick an ability from the list. It could be from anything. And then you just play the game that way. And it's a very different way to play World of Warcraft. And I thought it was a very interesting thing to do. I also thought they had one for City of Heroes. It was very similar. Any of the powers you wanted, you could just put them on your character. It didn't matter class-based wise or whatever. So I'm waiting to see the role-playing game do it, because I feel like, if I remember correctly, we get classes in the 70s and 80s, and then people want to differentiate themselves from Dungeons and Dragons, and they start building in the 90s a bunch of very class-less based systems for role-playing. But then those go away and they go out of favor again. The hobby kind of dies down a little bit, and then it starts ramping back up, and we're back to classes and D&D again is what everybody's first introduction is. There's like that. So we're there, and I wonder if we're in that spot again now where we're going to go, okay, all these people that want to build games, they don't want to build D&D anymore. They don't want to build their 5 classes, name them something different, and call it, you know, Pathfinder or whatever they want. You know, they want to do something different. How do I go different? Well, I go super, you know, I go really out there. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see. I don't know if they're making tons of money off of these books. They're making tons of money because the popularity still seems pretty high. I don't know if 2020 might have been the peak. What do you think? Because I feel like in 17, 18, 19, we were skyrocketing in popularity, skyrocketing in the number of people I was running into saying they played D&D, or they'd see a shirt I was wearing and be like, oh, D&D, you're playing that?
Well, that's when Critical Role blew up, you know? And,
and
I think
but
that
then
helped
we hit 2020, and it's like, I wonder if we're getting there, or are we still rising? Are we still on this?
I think it's
astronomical peak here.
It's a lot easier for your friend to be like, hey, come over and let's play D&D. Or you go to the game store and you sit down and play D&D. And although there are lots of online options, if I didn't know somebody, and because it's like, okay, I want to play D&D, I guess I'll go to this website and try to find a group. Like, I would never find internet strangers to play D&D with. So I wonder if COVID's causing that problem. I don't know. But
and that's what I wondered. It's obviously because of this change in the world.
Yeah.
We're all a little bit more homebody. We're all a little bit, we're getting rid of extraneous leaving our homes for the most part. Like a lot of times you might go every single day. If you look back a year from now, you ran errands 2 or 3 times a day, every single day to do stuff. If you look at your past week, just this past week, I think I left the house 1 time. Right, maybe. And that was it. So it's definitely different. I'm sure that's impacting gaming in some way.
Yeah.
But we're all moving online, so it's weird. It's interesting to see. I always like to see if I like to look back on trends and try to pick where the turning point where things were for. Like for 3.5, obviously when 3rd edition, when they start doing the 0.5 stuff, that's the turning point of 3.5, right? It's starting its arc. It's getting its final portion of the game, and then it's going to be done, and they start thinking about 4th edition. There's a point in there, a certain book you could probably point to if we dived into it and say, this was it. This is when it started and it ended here, and now we get 4th, and it went from here and it ended here, you know.
Yeah. Well,
I wonder where we're at.
I don't know. And just the timeline though. So D&D 5e came out in 2014. So it's going to be the 10-year anniversary of 5th edition in 2024. And that 2024, it will also be the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons as a whole, starting in 1974. And you got to know, like Wizards of the Coast has to do something for that. Because the fact that it's 10 years of 5th edition, which has been their most successful RPG product, and 50 years of D&D as a whole, there's something big there. And so I don't know if that's when we're going to see a new thing. And we've kind of talked about this too, where a lot of RPGs seem to have about 8 to 10 years. Yeah. And then it's just like, you know, we release stuff on a steady scale and adventures, but boy, we oversaturated, and now there's too many options and players are kind of spooked. And I don't know, and maybe that won't be the case, but I feel like we're going to get, I don't know. They're going to release. It's going to be big. Like 2024, we're going to see a lot of stuff. So,
or even the idea that 8 years ago you had a certain set of design skills. You are 8 years later in the process, and you're looking back at what you did 8 years ago, thinking, "Why in the world did we do that? Why didn't we do that better? We're doing things better now." And I think that's also part of the catalyst for a company to look back and say, "Okay, we need a shutoff point," because we're such good or different designers now. We're doing things differently now. We need a fresh start to say, look all these design skills we have and have learned to really push the stuff to the next level. We need to move to that next one too. So I don't know. I think Pathfinder growing in popularity would be one thing that could push it. I think the timeline that you're talking about, 10 years of D&D 5e, 50th year anniversary, that all, you don't get all, you know, the planets to align like that very often. So it makes sense if you take advantage of that when it does happen, and you kind of grab onto the nostalgia of that and the idea of being able to market 10th year anniversary, 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons, 50th year anniversary, all that kind of stuff all at one time sounds really cool. So I'm excited. We got 2021. Who knew? None of us even knew if we were going to make it to 2021. So hopefully we got one more month to go. Not everybody knock on wood. That you make it to
hopefully I've got another, I don't know. I'm hoping for another 50 years in me. But yeah, so we'll jump over to Bardic Inspiration, which is Lucian's favorite part of the show. Yeah. Bardic Inspiration. Ding. Like, I don't know. Yep. So thank you again, our wonderful soundbite by partially by me, because it's using just my voice. But no. And Mr. Lucian, what were you bardically inspired about?
I was thinking about the idea of dungeon masters of old, early 70s. Maybe 75, 76, 77. The game is new. It's on shelves. It's in pamphlet form. It's not even made it to like a box set yet at that point. Dungeon masters are building dungeons, but a lot of those players, we all know, if you know the story, come from wargaming, right? That's the consensus, that there's this wargaming scene going on, and out of that, those players and those groups, we start to move into the RPG scene. It starts the D&D and all these other,
because they're like, we could reenact this actual war.
Right.
But like, what if we reenact this actual war with dragons?
Right.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
kind of where
Lord
it
of the
came from.
Rings and fantasy books are popping up and doing really well. And I think that's driving a lot of that. Like when you look at Appendix N and all that kind of stuff, you can see the type of stuff they're consuming, the type of games they're playing, and they're ready for something new at that time. So what was interesting to me is that I feel like those dungeon masters back in that day, the wargaming style dungeon master, was a dungeon master who was really a history buff also. I mean, if you're going to go through painting uniforms on miniatures and reenacting battles, wargaming was about, at first, reenacting historical battles using, whatever they could find for the unit lists and say, what if, the pikemen of Macedonia had to fight the horse-mounted hussars of whatever, and they were like, they really wanted to be able to play that out and see what was going on. So they were big history buffs, and usually they might have been more well-read on history and historical events, and they were interested in that kind of stuff. It was something that they would do as fun. Now, flash forward to 2020, and you have Dungeon Masters, and I think we build games based off pop culture media or books that we've read or these ideas that pop in our mind. Like go back and look at all of our bardic inspirations, all these crazy fantasy cool ideas.
Sir, the Mandalorian is history, okay? It happened a long time ago in a galaxy far away.
Far away. That is
Those
true.
are actual battles. No, go ahead.
Okay, I think that's true. But we probably don't have, I mean, you wouldn't get it from me and Jordan, the history buff where me and you studied the Battle of Waterloo, how it happened, what led up to it, what was the political considerations going on, and then what units were involved, right? But I wonder if we could go back to that or something similar, not necessarily about the war or the battle, but like taking a historical event, molding it into your campaign, change the names, change the places and continent stuff. But let's say we took the Battle of Troy, right? The whole storyline behind, there's a city of Troy, and there's a beautiful woman who is the daughter of the leader of the city of Troy, and another leader wants to come and take that person and make them their bride, and that's kind of like the storyline. But you dive in deep, you go into the true history of it, like everything about it. Mm-hmm. Now you bring it into your campaign by changing names and changing things. And the idea is to wait to see how long before your players realize, wait a minute, are we playing Troy? Is that what's going on here? Or you're like, wait a minute, is this World War I? Is this what's happening? You understand the history event that you chose so well that you're able to portray it in the game and then see how the players react to it as it's happening around them. Right. Mm-hmm. So basically picking a historical event that you're interested in. Maybe you're super interested in the crash of the Hindenburg or the very first flight of the Wright brothers or putting the first man on the moon or maybe the discovery of America or anything you want to pick, like the Mongol raids across China or whatever cool thing that you're just like, I'm into this. I've done a lot of research about it. I know a lot about it. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to put it in my Dungeons & Dragons game and let my players experience that and see if they pick up on it, see if they fall into the same tropes, see if they make some of the same good or bad decisions that the historical people made good or bad, right? How did they react? How did they do the things? And see and just kind of see where it plays out. So you have something to build from, like a true historical event to build from. The burning of London, like the what's their big holiday, the one where they talk about they blow up London, the gunpowder thing.
Remember the 5th of November,
Guy Fawkes Day or something. Yeah. I'm not from there, so I apologize if I don't know that history. But that, like, somebody could pick that and say, okay, I'm going to put that in my campaign in such a way, and Waterdeep. And I'm going to play it out and portray it out until somebody figures this out, that's what I'm doing. So I just thought that was kind of a fun thing. And so I wanted to put it out there, and I wanted to see for our community, what cool historical event would they choose that they're interested in, they know a lot about, and they would love to put their players in the middle of and see what happens. The Boston Tea Party, put us right in the middle of that.
I feel like that's a lot of Call of Cthulhu games where you do that, but you do a different spin on it. So like we have the Boston Tea Party, but as the tea soaks down, these weird alien creatures come up or something like that. Or like, we're going to fly to the moon, but when we actually go around to the dark side of the moon, there's a base of like Nazis there. Yeah. And you have to take them out. So I don't know. Like, I like that idea a lot. But those alternate histories where you're just kind of like, we're going to do this, but put a little bit of a spin on it. And I don't think that's exactly what you were talking about, but that's what inspired me. So
right. Yeah. Like, is there a historical event that you've looked up and read about that just interested you? Didn't have anything to do with gaming or whatever. It was just something that you were super interested in, and you read about it. You're like, oh, I wonder what's going on. I read a book about, I think some paleontologists wrote about the Native Americans that lived in the Michigan area, back before there was any idea of colonization or any idea that anybody had come over from Europe at that point. And they were trying to piece together what life might be like for the Great Lakes region of the natives that lived here, the Native Americans that had lived here. And it was an interesting thing because they wrote it as a fictional story, but they still had a lot of intrigue between the tribes and the different people they were meeting and the different things they were doing. And there was still a story in there. There was still a fantasy story in there. So I was thinking that same kind of thing. Like, if you took that historical grounding and then threw it in your fantasy world to see what to help your players experience something that you were really into also. Like, it also kind of harkened back to the idea that my dwarf in my campaign for Seeking Revenor wanted to build a mine, and I didn't want to just do a copper, gold, or silver mine. I wanted to do something interesting. So I rolled on a elements chart of all kinds of different ores and things, and I rolled cinnabar. And then I was like, oh, cinnabar. Well, I kind of know what that is, but what does it really mean? So I went into this big 2-week-long history lesson of how people use cinnabar, process it, products that it's in. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I started putting that in the game, and I thought it was kind of fun. So it's in the vein of that, which we've talked about before, but taking something that you just decided to, the Kennedy assassination. Maybe you love watching every single one of those movies, and you're all about the conspiracies, what happened, who did it, how did it all lead up to the way it did. Now imagine putting that in Waterdeep in some way with your characters, where the main leader is doing a parade, and then there's a death, and you're part of the investigation, and you're trying to figure out the different factions and who wants them dead and who doesn't. Like, you can throw that in there and see how long they're like, wait a minute, are we doing the Kennedy assassination?
Yeah.
Is that what's going on? So I just think that was my bardic inspirations. Hopefully it inspires some of you out there.
Yeah. No, this is an urban legend about like the Men in Black in the 80s and 70s would put this arcade game in various places across the United States called Polybius. Yeah. And Polybius was designed to mind control people or something. And I've been wanting to do a Kids on Bikes game that, like, a long form one. I want to do not just a one shot, but I'd like to do like, and by long form, I mean probably just like 4 or 5 sessions.
Yeah, slow play.
But I like the idea of like, well, what is this Polybius? And because it's just so cool and like so 70s, and like the government's out to get you and they want to mind control you, and I love that. So something like that, like
Starfighter.
Like Last Starfighter, or maybe it is. Yeah, maybe they finally hack Polybius, and all of a sudden they're on a planet. Like, that could be cool too. Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Every time you think of Cinnabar, or you say Cinnabar, I think of Pokemon because of Cinnabar Island. But that's just.
Okay.
I just want to say, there's probably others out there that are like, isn't that an island in that Pokemon franchise? Yeah. No, that's really cool. My bardic inspiration is about OpenD6. You can go to opend6project.org, and all of the rules are there, and it's really cool. And so you can use that as a reference. It is part of the open game license so that other people can take it and hack it and do what you want. But what inspired this is I did another podcast with a friend, an old friend from back in my theater days.
Another podcast.
Well, I was a guest on his podcast. Yes, that happens. But an old friend of mine, and he was asking me about D&D, and he said, now you started with 4th edition, but like, do you miss 4th edition? And I was like, no, I don't, because all of the things that I liked about 4th edition, I've taken and used in my 5th edition games. Like, I have skill challenges, and I have the things that I liked about that system. So I don't think I need to go back and play it necessarily, And I wonder if a lot of other people feel that way too. Like, they liked 3rd edition, or 3.5 or whatever, but like the things I liked about it, I can kind of do with this new system. So like there's really no reason to go back. But what I do miss is the like fine tune pushing battle grid sessions that we had. And so that's what I was thinking about is I wanted to recreate some of that fighting. And that got me into thinking about like PvP as spellcasters and things like that. And literally like that would be cool to have a cool dice system where I could secretly make a character and somebody else could secretly make a character. And then we could like fight together and summon pets and do all kinds of weird stuff. And I don't know if it's going to work out or not. But I will say, if you guys are interested in this, eventually I'm going to solidify my rules and put them up on my Patreon and stuff. And that'll be fun to share them and see if anybody wants to playtest or things like that. I've actually been doing some other interesting stuff with Patreon. Is I built a mime class for D&D 5th edition where I wanted to have a class that could mimic
no, you didn't.
Other players. I thought that would be fun. Do we
do
not
they
like
paint
that?
Their face white though, and
no.
Are they trapped in boxes?
I mean, that would be fun. Maybe there's armor.
You're building a mimic class.
Mimic
is what
class.
You're saying. There you go. I gotcha.
Same thing.
Mimes.
Anyway, so that's kind of my Bardic Inspiration. It's what I've been working on. And it's been fun to just like game develop. And speaking of game developing, I've been listening to a really good podcast called The Secret Cellar. And The Secret Cellar, I think it's discontinued because their last episode was August of 2020. So I'm not sure how active it is. But the guy's really smart. He's a professor and he loves role-playing games. And specifically, The Secret Cellar is about Invisible Sun. But it's not your typical, I don't know if there is a typical Invisible Sun podcast, but it's about game design. And so he has like, the first episode, he has this game design friend on who makes video games, and they talk about like what makes Invisible Sun different, but they're just kind of talking about game design in general. And it's really interesting. And the second episode, he has an author friend, and they talk about like the importance of story and how do you build game design mechanics that support story. And so if you guys are interested, I mean, I don't really recommend a lot of other podcasts on this podcast, I guess, but like I really do recommend The Secret Cellar. It's really good. You can go to secretcellar.zeros.bar. And if you guys are interested in The Invisible Sun, I would also recommend it.
Such a good concept for a game. And I still have not met anybody that's played it, but man.
Yeah, the only person I know is Grant Ellis.
Grant.
He plays it, and he's really into it too. And he's one of those guys where he's like, no, it's one of those, like, it might be the most important RPG in my life, but I don't actively run it or play, because it's weird. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, I'll say this and then we can move on to the games we're playing. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is Monty Cook made Invisible Sun, and he made the Cipher system, or Numenera. Numenera is very simple. The DM rolls no dice. You only roll a d20. Everything is designed to allow the DM, the game master, I should say, allow the game master to perpetuate the story, and then the players roll to see what happens, and then the game master bounces back. But it's not like, oh, let me as the game master roll a bunch of hits and stuff. Like, the players roll everything. And that's designed on purpose to keep a story moving and to keep the simplicity of it. So he was like, it's interesting how you have somebody who clearly knows how to make a simplistic game, but then made a very overly complex game. And what was the design purpose or choice behind that? And I was driving and I was just like, what? You're right. And it just blew my mind because I never thought about it like that. Like, Monty Cook's a smart guy. Like, he knows how to make a simple game, but he actively wanted to make something that was very complex. And then if it's that complex, why? Because in a way, you're almost alienating sales, because people are going to be like, well, A, it's very expensive. And B,
the cube,
the black cube. Like, A, it's a very expensive game, but B, this is hard to get into. And I was even just like, what am I reading?
Tarot cards.
Takes you a long time to get through it.
Maps.
But at the same time, I'm so intrigued by it. And I really love the world, and I want to play a game in it so bad. So, so the Secret Cellar is totally ramping up my love of Invisible Sun again.
Nice.
I found a great one shot, and and it has pre-printed characters and everything, and I need to just get some friends over and be like, I don't know if I'm playing this correctly, but we're gonna try it out, and just and then if people are interested, we can do that. Actually, and I could try it online too, because there are some online resources that Monty Cook invented or provided, because he's like, well, people are gonna try and play this online, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got 4 minutes. What are you playing? What's going on in your gaming world, Lucian?
Dungeon of the Mad Mage, still dungeon and dragoning. We're been on the third
Are you
level.
dragoning your feet and not getting through the mage fast enough?
We are.
Getting through the dungeon. Sorry.
We've been in Skullport for quite a bit, and it was a first time we had a session with no fighting in a while. We've been a very heavy
combat,
hit everything that we come across kind of group. And this was a full couple hour session of just talking to people in town or trying to do some things. But it also felt a little bit like DM roadblocks in some ways. Like you're like, oh, you would hear about a rumor or something here, but when you try to follow up on it, you would never be able to get any more information, or you wouldn't be able to convince anybody to tell you anything more than the one little blurb they gave you. And that's an interesting blurb, but why can't I learn more about it? Why does it feel like every time I try to find out more, there's a fence in front of me? Almost like, so I thought that was kind of funny. That was just a feeling I was getting during the session. And I to the point where the group finally just kind of decided, well, let's just leave Skullport, because we're not really getting anywhere. We're not making any progress. Let's just go. Let's go back to dungeon delving. So I don't know if I want to ask Danimal at some point if that was intended, or if he didn't know it was happening when he was doing it. Like in his mind, it all made perfect sense, but didn't realize the way we were viewing it was, well, we keep getting this, no, that door's locked. You can't go through that door. You have to go do something else. And, and we didn't know what else we could do then all of a sudden, because now we're all thrown off. So that'll be interesting. I'm interested to see where we go. That's our Tuesday night game that we play quite a bit. And I'm hoping we're getting to our next level here pretty soon, because I want to get to that level 2 cleric. Because then I can get that divinity, channel divinity.
Yeah, channel divinity. That's where it's at.
Then I spent a lot of my week, because right after our session last week, if you watched last week's Saturday morning D&D show, Jordan was super excited about a cyberpunk game. We talked a lot about it. So then I spent the rest of the day devising what would I do if I wanted to run Jordan through a cyberpunk game. So I spent the whole day writing. I got my full OneNote is where I do all my campaign prep now. And I just started creating this game based on the storyline of Altered Carbon from the Netflix show. And I thought, well, he hasn't watched it, so he won't know that that's going on. It's written by fantastic writers. I don't have to even do any of the work of what's going on. And I thought this would be kind of cool. So I had him roll some character stats, and I started creating the thing. And I was using the Carbon 2185 RPG, which is a 5e-ish based game that you can play as a cyberpunk game. Yeah. And it was interesting. It really got the juices flowing. It was fun to do a prep. I didn't quite get enough of it finished. I still don't know if I'm quite close enough, but it was interesting thinking through. And I wanted it to be a one-on-one session where it was just going to be one DM, one player. And it was going to be like, you wake up in a world, you don't know what's kind of going on. There's a mystery going on. It could be easy to be a one-shot kind of thing to introduce you to the world of Altered Carbon.
Did you see in our Saturday morning D&D show Discord, somebody, Dungeoneers Pack, posted that there's a
you can get it free.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to point out. Like you can get the Carbon 2185 Cyberpunk
PDF
free. So
website, this one right
here. Go get it. I got it this morning. And I was going to go through it because it's free for the weekend, I guess, for they want to.
Everybody pick it up. And I think I have it written down. I don't know when it'll happen, but one of these days I think I'll run Jordan through this idea I've got of a 2 or 3 hour session of the Altered Carbon world using this rule set, and let him experience cyberpunk, in a role-playing game, which I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah,
so that's what I had kind of done, and
I
thought it was fun. Hopefully I get it done. We'll see how things go. You start working on something, then
something
else happens.
I've got 12 jillion projects. It's crazy. So.
Yeah, that started. But what about Jordan? You've got like no minutes left to tell us. But did Rod of Seven Parts end?
No.
Okay.
I was kind of thinking it was going to end, but the more we were exploring, I was like, yeah, it's just not the right. It's not the right final thing. But we did end with them finding the last rod fragment. They attached it to the rod. It's now the Rod of Law. It is all together. And the minute they did that, Miska the wolf spider appeared. And they were smart because they know Miska's a demon. So he created a magic circle around themselves. And they attached the last fraud fragment within that circle. So when Miska appeared, he can't get to them. Like he's blocked out because of their magic circle. So that's fun. And then we ended there. And I'll just say, like, I really didn't think that I role played it well. I was like, I don't know what I thought Miska was supposed to be, because in my mind he's kind of a force of nature, but I don't know. So the fight will be really, really cool. I don't know if I don't know. I'm curious as to what's going to happen, and then where they go after this. So again, there will not be I'm sorry about my game prep series on Twitch, but just with family and stuff, I haven't been able to do it. And so I will not be doing that again tomorrow. But I think this Wednesday is going to be the final episode. So if you are curious, you should come hang out and see who lives and dies and the fate of the Rod of Seven Parts, the Rod of Law.
I got there just as you guys were ending.
Oh, really?
Like, oh, no, because I just remembered it. I'd been playing Diablo 3 and I was ranking up my character and trying to get it going. And then I was like, oh, no, Jordan's playing. I'm going to go over there and have that playing. And then you guys were wrapping up. I was like, oh, no, I missed it.
Yeah, 8:30 Eastern. So, come hang out on Nerd Immersion's channel. No, and it's fun. I've actually been making, they're over there. That's why I gestured. But I've been making some little Christmas packages for my players, because I was like, wow, we're like finishing this game. This is kind of cool. And like Rod of Seven Parts, I read this way back when I was still playing 4th edition and just thought it was the coolest story, and like running around collecting these rod fragments. Like I just thought it was really fun. So I'm very happy that I was finally able to play it. And it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, I got it out of my system. Like I just, like, do you ever have those modules that you're just thinking about constantly and you're like, oh my gosh. And so now I'm like, it's done. I don't have to bring this up anymore. And so the Rod of Seven Parts is over with. And I have like 15
How many episodes has it been so far?
This will be 32.
32 sessions to get
32
this one
weeks
down.
of D&D. Yeah.
Nice.
And they're about 2-hour sessions, sometimes 2.5 hours. So, and it's just casual and it's a lot of fun, and I've been really enjoying it. My players are great. So, I will miss them. We're talking about doing some more, so we'll see if they keep those same characters, if somebody else wants to DM. But regardless, I think we're going to take most of December off and then meet back up in January, February of 2021 and start a game there. So just to have some time off, because I need to focus on YouTube for a little bit, make some more videos and things like that. But yeah.
Definitely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. Thank you so much for joining us live. I now have more stuff to read, as I'm going to check out this Open Legend, the open source RPG that you guys recommended. So thank you very much. Please like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast. They can listen on anchor.fm. If you literally just search Saturday Morning D&D Show, you will find us. We love your reviews on all of those things: Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, all things like that. So we really appreciate it. And yeah, happy the end of November, and we will see you next week in December, for our just Christmas spectacular. I don't know.
Yeah,
we got nothing
build up to it. 12 days of Christmas D&D. No,
the 3 weeks of Christmas D&D or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week, and stay safe and be awesome. Bye.